The article that I read was about examining the difference between empathy and sympathy in the workplace. So essentially, what the researchers were thinking is that somebody who is an emotionally demanding job, which they said was an EDJ, would become more empathetic as their career went on. So they studied people who were like social workers and doctors and nurses as compared to like CPAs, people who like worked at like desk jobs. And the question was like, does working in occupations with very emotionally demanding jobs moderate the effects of age on empathy? And so like the methods through this, they had 128 participants ranging from the ages 19 to 68. They were recruited for the study. Employees were then interviewed and instructed to remember, relive, and think out loud negative and positive emotionally intense memories from their working life. These conversations were recorded and then taken back to a laboratory where the participants interviewed were rated on their intensity of their emotions. And from there, participants were selected to watch films that would like evoke emotion. And then the participants were told to fill out a 7-point Likert scale survey measuring empathy and sympathy in their jobs. The results were not what the researchers thought that they would find. Initially, defined in terms with their age, held more empathy. In fact, it was the opposite. They saw that that they would become more sympathetic, and within these careers, it was found that it was a decline. And so the key takeaways from this was that within the workforce, empathy is a characteristic trait that is more prominent in those positions that they're having interpersonal reactions with other humans. These job types are more interpersonal and have workers needing to predict people's emotions and keep people comfortable and satisfied, creating this high need for empathy. However, in contrary to what was predicted, as workers aged in these EJDs, instead of finding that these older employees experience lower emotional congruence than younger employees. And this distance of replacing empathy with sympathy set up boundaries and is thought to allow employees to be available. This brought in the question of whether or not it was to either protect professional well-being or employees felt exhausted with their role in EJDs. However, further research is needed to find out why this was.
Can you clarify? So the results were not what the researchers initially expected, meaning the researchers expected, maybe you can go back to the first page.
Yeah, sure.
That empathy would increase. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. So they thought that people, as they were in this like longevity of their career of having to be like empathetic and having to like feel emotion with people that they're working with, because they were practicing this sort of empathy, that they would be more empathetic as a person in their job than people in like in the younger generation who were coming into these positions. But that's not what they found. They found people actually pulling away from being as emotional with people and feeling with people and feeling more sympathetic. So like understanding people's emotions and where they're coming from and feeling for them. Sorry, my internet might cut out, guys. And taking like the feeling with people and feeling more for people.
So yeah, so the takeaway was like, as people age, they thought people would be more empathetic as they age, right? But as people age, the idea was that maybe what's happening is there's like emotional fatigue almost over the years, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly sure why they have to conduct more research on to the findings that they found, but yeah, exactly. So I thought this was really interesting because people that I've actually been having a lot of conversations recently with people who don't understand the difference between sympathy and empathy. And I think it's something that's really important, especially in like conflict resolution, to understand the difference between feeling for somebody and feeling with somebody and like the emotional difference between that. And I thought that was interesting how people become that they think are becoming just emotionally exhausted from feeling so much empathy throughout their career.
It's interesting because like just intuitively, I would have had the expectation that you'd be more empathetic when you're newer and younger, and you'd be more sympathetic when you're older. Because
yeah, I thought the same.
I agree.
I was interested. That's why this one like kind of spoke to me. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
I think this highlights just the internal work that is necessary to show up effectively and constructively, especially in EJDs, emotionally job.
Yeah.
What was that again?
Emotionally demanding jobs.
Emotionally demanding jobs. Yeah, it just highlights again like the internal work that is necessary, because compassion fatigue or emotional fatigue, as Jeremy said, like that's a real thing. Vicarious trauma is a real struggle for a lot of people in these emotionally demanding jobs. So I would agree with the results, and like, you know, my intuition would tell me that similarly as you both, that okay, as you age, the more you're doing it, the more repetition, the more fatigued you're going to get, and eventually, yeah. And again, I think this is pointing to, like, for a takeaway for me would be, make sure that the self-care is always happening throughout emotionally demanding jobs, in order to alleviate your empathy from turning into sympathy later on.
I wonder too, like what are the general outcomes of, in terms of, you know, A, employee well-being, and B, coworker relationships, of having more sympathy versus having more empathy?
Yeah. I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with like switching to like sympathy, if it's like in order to protect like oneself, like in your job, as long as like you're able to successfully like be there for somebody that like you're working with. But I do think that people, even if they realize it or not, can understand the difference when somebody like understands what they're going through, and talking with them instead of like talking at them, and like kind of like understanding what they're going through, but not wanting to feel that with them. I think there's like a fine line to cross, and like a line to walk on as well. But it was just interesting also to see like what you guys think too. Like, is it good to be more sympathetic? Is it good to be more empathetic?
I don't know. Yeah, that'd be an interesting, like, because I think you're right. It's very important to, I think, to protect yourself, because it's, you know, if you're not in a good balanced state, you're not going to have good relationships. So if you can protect yourself, and you have to be more sympathetic than empathetic, and then you feel maybe you could be there for someone better than you could if you were trying to take on their emotions.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see, like, yeah, some research of like what's the outcome in terms of like how their relationships are, or how they're just generally feeling. Is it sort of like a maintenance of subjective well-being throughout the work life, to
Yeah.
to sort of transition from empathy into sympathy? Does that just kind of help maintain well-being?
Yeah, and I guess that's what they need to find out next.